This episode is brought to you by Palo Alto. As the world's cybersecurity leader and proud Diamond corporate member of HIMSS, Palo Alto Networks is committed to the healthcare sector. Our engineers design solutions specifically for healthcare to outpace cyber threats, enabling providers to pursue innovation without compromise. Partner with us to safeguard patient data, deliver care from anywhere, and secure connected devices, including medical IoT. Our best in class cybersecurity is backed by industry leading threat intelligence and AI to drive autonomous security operations and reduce dependence on multiple disconnected vendor systems. It's what makes us the cybersecurity partner of choice and the security to depend on when lives depend on you. Visit thisweekhealth.com/palo-alto-networks for more information.
Today on Unhack the News.
These threat groups have started to understand, wow, they know what our next step is. They know how we negotiate. They know what our next move is going to be in a ransomware attack. So they're trying to have to hide their playbook.
Hi, I'm Drex, a recovering healthcare CIO and longtime cyber advisor and strategist for some of the world's most innovative cybersecurity companies. Now I'm president of This Week Health's 229 Cyber and Risk community. And this is Unhack the News, a mostly plain English, mostly non-technical show covering the latest and most important security news stories. And now, this episode of Unhack the News. Hey everybody, it's Drex, and we are doing Unhack the News again, and there's never any shortage of stuff to talk about in the news. I've got Troy with me from Palo Alto Networks. Say hi, Troy.
Hey, how you doing, Drex? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Glad you're here. We've been working on this for a while, you and I, trying to figure out how to get together for Unhack the News. I'm glad we finally got it done. It's your first time on the show.
It is. Thanks for having me.
Maybe we should just start here. Tell me a little bit about you and your background and what are you working on right now?
Yeah, I've been in healthcare my entire career, led EMR implementations in the beginning of my career for about 5 years, and across a couple large health systems, and then the CISO at a couple large health systems as well. Now I've moved on to this side of the business, love it, work with healthcare customers every day, see something different every day. And so I'm our global industry leader of healthcare at Palo Alto Networks. So we've got a large portfolio of services and products that protect, secure, and sometimes remediate breaches, right?
As it turns out, I'm reading more and more. We do the CISO summits around the country. We do the city tour dinners around the country. The conversations with CISOs have the transition has happened over time from it's about keeping everyone out. That's just like table stakes now. It's become much more about detection and response.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's defense in depth, being prepared, and trying to layer in security as best as possible across a really complex ecosystem.
And it definitely is a complex ecosystem. One of the stories I want to talk about today is something from the Register. And this isn't specifically about a healthcare organization at all, but you and I both know that often the first time a healthcare organization knows that there's something going wrong is when the FBI calls them. And in this particular article, it says, this is the FBI, open up. China's Volt Typhoon is on your network. And it's funny because it gets into the story of the person who got the call from the security team was like, you're crazy. This sounds like somebody's trying to scam me. And it took them a while to actually really answer the call. But it's true, right? Do you guys see that too?
Yeah, even going back to my days as a CISO, I've been that person in that chair, right? So I've gotten that call from the FBI. I've gotten that call from large partners saying they've gotten the call specific to us from the FBI. The advice I give to organizations and peers in the market is establish those relationships with the FBI, your local field office, so that you're not surprised. You know who you're talking with. You know what their response is going to be to this. Include them in your tabletop exercises. And then the other side of it, because some customers become so surprised or not sure, is to have your formed relationships from incident response and threat intelligence perspective. That's important because unfortunately, there's all too many partners out there that are using this, we call it ambulance chasing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Saying they have a threat intelligence specific to your organization. So just making sure these are the ones that we're going to partner with to receive that information and act upon. Because like you said, Drex, that example there was somebody, gosh, is this right? So it's just important to know what sources you're going to utilize.
The relationship is key to the operation. It is no matter what we're doing, right? As executives or as security folks, that recommendation that you made about make sure you know your FBI field office and who the people there are who might be calling you. Include them in your exercises. The same with regional office,
Mhm.
your local police authorities who are in the cybercrime unit. All of those folks are really important to have in your Rolodex, like at the top of your Rolodex, so that you know who they are. You have them programmed into your phone. So if they call, it pops up, you know who they are. Really important part of the whole plan for cybersecurity. Let me flip to another story here because this one I find to be really interesting. And it's from Cyberscoop. And the story is about how investigators say differing names for hacker groups hinder law enforcement. And that's really interesting to me because there are a lot of different names. Sometimes it's a series of letters and numbers. Sometimes it's a handle that's been given to them by a company like yours or other companies. Sometimes it's something that's a handle that's been given to them by a law enforcement organization. It makes it really difficult. As you can imagine, if there's a hacker group that goes by 5 or 6 or 10 different names, it can be a real challenge. How do you all deal with that? Because you're working against these bad guys all the time.
Yeah, so it's important for us to know who we're working with, working against, because we start to learn their playbook, right? Whether it's ransomware negotiation, whether it's the tools that they use, their craft, where their skill sets lie. That's really important. That's like game planning against a football team, right? If they can hide their formation and you don't know exactly what their next step is, that puts them in the best position. The better we can know who we're working with or against from a response helps us. But they're crafty. They try to change their mechanisms, their names, and try to hide their deception techniques, just like we do from a security perspective. Anything an organization can do to understand, obviously, our Unit 42 team, this is what they do each and every day, right? Big division of Palo Alto networks. So we've got a deep understanding of these different threat groups. And these threat groups have started to understand, wow, they know what our next step is. They know how we negotiate. They know what our next move is going to be in a ransomware attack. So they're trying to have to hide their playbook, hide their formations, all of those types of things so that they're better positioned. But that's our perspective on it. That's what we're seeing.
It's always amazing to me to think about. I used to get threat intel briefs on Friday, and it
Mhm.
was always, I would leave those threat intel briefs on Friday afternoon. And I'm like, why do I do these threat intel briefs on Friday afternoon? Because they've ruined my weekend. Because a
Yeah.
lot of bad stuff happens over the weekend. As you
Yeah.
guys get into this, looking at the naming conventions, and trying to figure out what the playbook really is and how do you, I mean, not to give away tradecraft, but how do you figure that out? How do you know what those moves are?
We see repetition, right? And all of us are creatures of habit, no matter what we're doing, within our daily lives, whether we're doing good or doing bad. See them doing reconnaissance early in the week. Maybe they select their victim. They start to do maybe a little bit later in the week. They work the same hours that they get up during the daylight. They operate like an enterprise, right? So if it's 8 to 5 in their geography, wherever they're at in the world, that's when they're going to be working. Now, in some scenarios, depending upon your security maturity, do you have your shields up and your best people in place to protect your organization at those times? And sometimes that can be advantageous to them. But so we start to see them starting to do phishing attacks early in the week. And then once they gain a foothold, what we see in healthcare, at least what we've seen over the last 5 years, based on our experience, is then they'll wait until Saturday night, Sunday morning, that type of thing, and really launch their attack when a health system likely doesn't have staff on board, doesn't have the maturity of a strong security operations center, and maybe isn't utilizing a third party to do the response. So then the threat actors, they're just 2 steps ahead, right? Because we all know, or a lot of us know, what the inside of a hospital looks like and IT looks like over the weekends. And if they can get 2 steps ahead, it's harder if you don't have instant response retainers in place to contact vendors, all of those types of things. That's why they launch their attacks at that time, because they can be most successful.
Yeah, once they're in, if they can get, because it barely takes any time now, right? It used to be, tell me if you think this is true. This is just like a notion that I feel like I have from talking to folks. It used to be that the bad guys would get in and they would very slowly and meticulously go through the network and find all the vulnerabilities and do all that kind of work. it feels like they're in much more of a hurry now. They get in and they get the job done. Am I thinking about that right? Or is it?
Yeah, and I think this is like building a home, right? They all have different roles and responsibilities. The plumber's doing their job, the sheetrocker's doing their job. Maybe the person that's going after executing the phishing attack is inside the same threat group, but it might be a totally separate contractor that is going to sell that information onto the person that's going to execute the ransomware attack. So I do think you're right there. I think their work is very intentional and very quick because that's their role. So yeah.
And my brain works in analogies, and I've tried to explain this in the past as the bad guys are like big tech companies, and they have a lot of independent consultants that work with
Mhm.
them who are really good at specific things like negotiating ransomware. But I
Mhm.
might actually steal your contractor example because I think that's actually a lot
Yeah.
better and a lot easier for more people to relate to. So thanks for that. I love a good analogy.
Yeah, yeah. And there's windows in there, right? Because just like a contractor, sometimes it takes time between when the plumber is done to when the sheetrocker shows up. So when we talk about mean time to detect and mean time to respond, that's why it's important because these contractors, these threat actors are sometimes waiting for the next resource to arrive. So when we close the window of our response, whether it's a phishing scam that then leads into a ransomware attack of them getting a foothold, that's why it's really important because they're not perfect. And there's definitely gaps within the timelines of their attacks.
And you're looking for that particular pattern of the way that contractor does the process of building their house. That helps you identify who that contractor, who that bad guy is, essentially.
Yeah, for sure. And what I've seen in my former roles and what I see today is when someone doesn't respond, the security operations center doesn't respond to maybe a phishing attack with a user, the longer that holds and the longer those credentials are out there, they're getting sold. The buyer is then going to try to use those as quickly as possible because if you're a buyer of any type of credit card information, credential theft, any of that information, we all know the faster you use it, the more reliable that information is going to be.
Yeah, fantastic, man. It's a crazy world we live in. And speaking of that, one more story. X was attacked this week. Twitter was attacked this week with a distributed denial of service. I have a problem with the word distributed. I don't know why, but a distributed denial of service, a DDoS attack. And I explained it a little bit earlier in the week in the 2 minute drill. A bunch of PCs or IoT devices or other things are compromised, and then they're built into sort of this bot army where the bad guy says,
Yeah.
go to this site or go to this web page and just launch traffic. It usually doesn't result in like ransomware or data being stolen. It's really just a disrupt the business kind of initiative. And in the spirit of the previous story, how hard it is to do attribution because these bad guys have lots of different names. In this case, it's hard to do attribution because sometimes those bot armies are all over the world, right?
Yeah, it's chaos. It's just total chaos into your network. It's coming from everywhere. You're not seeing like code manipulation. You're not seeing different languages necessarily because a lot of it is just network congestion, right? Fortunately, those attacks, they take a lot of resources, right? Not only people and reconnaissance, but then technology and bandwidth, right? But in some scenarios, these threat actors are finding compromised devices that they can then build a big, large bot army, right? And then point it in the direction of an organization that would really be affected. If we think about health systems or healthcare organizations, or even out to retail, I'm always very interested in my retail friends because they're really worried about the holiday season. Because if you look at the percentage of sales or their gross income or net revenue, that's much different than healthcare because it's very much distributed over the calendar year. We don't necessarily worry about that as much. Now, another scenario could be during benefits enrollment season. Now, that's a long season. So we got to think about that because threat actors are always evolving. They're looking for holes in operations within healthcare. And how could these different mechanisms that work in other industries, if you impact operations, you're going to get a ransomware payment, right? That's the name of the game as it relates to ransom attacks.
This doesn't just happen to companies like X. I know it's happened in healthcare too. A few years ago, there was a DDoS attack at Boston Children's, and there was a bunch of activity. Ultimately, that person was caught and convicted. But the other thing is sometimes these DDoS attacks are just distractions while something, watch my right hand because I'm doing something with my left hand as a magician would try to keep you fooled. Same thing, same kind of
Yeah,
thing.
and piling on, right? So it could be they've already compromised you from a ransomware perspective, or they're in the midst of it, right, as a distraction. But they can be piling on, and not just DDoS attacks. It can be other types of attacks like defacing your website,
Mm.
contacting your board members. All of these techniques are things that the threat actors are utilizing to apply more pressure to basically win their game of whatever their goal is. Usually it's monetarily involved, right?
You say something else there too that makes me think of a comment we probably should put out here too. As cybersecurity professionals, protecting yourself and protecting your family. I say that because sometimes they know who you are and that you're
Mhm.
a critical component in cybersecurity for your company. And so when they launch an attack on your company, they will sometimes launch an attack on you or your family, again, as a way to distract you from being able to do your work. You see any of that kind of stuff happen?
I think specific to healthcare, we see the threat actors in some scenarios contact board members, or maybe if they've impacted or stole a lot of patient records, they know the board members' names because they're on all these health systems websites, right? That's pretty common information. And if they steal that medical information, they contact that board member via probably a publicly known email address and say, "This was your patient encounter on this date. I've got your information." And then when you're in the heat of the moment and that board member comes to the meeting, right, that's really challenging, right? So a part of your tabletop exercises, including your board, including your senior leadership, these are the types of things that you're probably going to see happen, right? Especially in very large breaches.
Turning up the heat
Turn up the heat.
to push you toward that ransomware payment or
Yeah.
whatever the case may be. Hey, thanks for being on the show today. It's really good to see you. I hope this isn't the last time we do this. I'm looking forward to maybe making this a bit of a habit.
All right. Thanks, Drex. Good to be here.
Thanks for tuning in to UnHack the News. And while this show keeps you updated on the biggest stories, we also try to provide some context and even opinions on the latest developments. And now there's another way for you to stay ahead. Subscribe to our daily insights email. What you'll get is expertly curated health IT news straight to your inbox, ensuring you never miss a beat. Sign up at thisweekhealth.com/news. I'm your host, Drex DeFord. Thanks for spending some time with me today. And that's it for UnHack the News. As always, stay a little paranoid, and I'll see you around campus.